The year was 1893. Chicago was preparing to host the World's Fair, a grand celebration that would bring millions of visitors to the city. But while the world marveled at the gleaming white city with its magnificent exhibitions, just a few miles away, something far more sinister was taking shape. Dr. Henry Howard Holmes was building what he called a hotel. The locals knew it as the castle, but behind its ordinary facade lay America's first purpose-built murder factory. Holmes wasn't just any criminal. He was charming, intelligent, and devastatingly handsome. Women found him irresistible. Business partners trusted him completely. Neighbors considered him a pillar of the community. But beneath this perfect exterior lurked one of history's most calculating predators. Born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861 in New Hampshire, Holmes showed disturbing signs from an early age. As a child, he tortured animals and performed crude surgical experiments on stray cats and dogs. His fascination with death and anatomy would only grow stronger with time. By 1886, Holmes had made his way to Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. The city was booming, and opportunity seemed endless. He took a job at a local pharmacy, quickly gaining the trust of the elderly owner, Mrs. Holton. When she mysteriously disappeared, Holmes claimed she had moved to California. He now owned the pharmacy, but Holmes had bigger plans. Directly across from his pharmacy, he began construction of what he advertised as the World's Fair Hotel. 3 stories tall, stretching an entire city block, it would accommodate the flood of visitors expected for the 1893 Exposition. Construction began in 1887. But this was no ordinary building project. Holmes hired different crews for different sections, ensuring no single worker understood the complete layout. He frequently changed architects and contractors, often firing them without pay when they asked too many questions. What they were unknowingly building was a labyrinth of horror. The second and third floors contained over 100 rooms, but many had no windows. Some rooms were soundproofed. Others were equipped with gas jets that could flood the space with deadly fumes. Trapdoors led to secret passages. Some rooms contained nothing but a greased chute that dropped straight to the basement. The basement was Holmes's workshop of death. Here, he installed a crematorium, acid vats large enough to dissolve human bodies, and a dissection table. He had even constructed a medieval-style stretching rack. This was where Holmes would dispose of his victims, often selling their skeletons to medical schools for profit. Holmes opened his murder castle in 1892, just in time for the World's Fair. He advertised rooms at incredibly low rates, specifically targeting young women who had come to Chicago seeking work at the Exposition. These women, often traveling alone and with no local connections, made perfect victims. The pattern was always the same. Holmes would charm his victims with his sophisticated manner and medical credentials. He'd offer them employment in his pharmacy or promise them comfortable accommodations. Once they were inside his castle, they were trapped in his web. Minnie Williams was a wealthy heiress from Texas who fell under Holmes's spell. She signed over her property to him and disappeared. Emmeline Sigrand worked as Holmes's stenographer and was planning to marry. She vanished just before her wedding day. Julia Connor and her young daughter Pearl lived in Holmes's building while Julia worked in his pharmacy. Both disappeared without a trace. Holmes's method was as varied as it was brutal. Some victims were locked in soundproof rooms and left to suffocate. Others were gassed while they slept. Some were tortured on his stretching device before being killed. The basement crematorium worked constantly, burning away the evidence of his crimes. But Holmes wasn't just a killer. He was a master manipulator and con artist. He ran elaborate insurance scams, often taking out policies on his victims before murdering them. He sold their belongings, forged documents, and even sold their bodies to medical schools, making money from every aspect of their deaths. The World's Fair ended in October 1893, and with it, Holmes's steady stream of victims began to dry up. By 1894, creditors were closing in, and suspicions were growing. Holmes fled Chicago, leaving behind his castle of horrors. His downfall came through an insurance scheme gone wrong. Holmes had convinced his associate, Benjamin Pitezel, to fake his own death so they could collect the insurance money. But Holmes actually killed Pitezel, then murdered 3 of Pitezel's children to cover his tracks. Detective Frank Geyer began investigating the missing Pitezel children, following Holmes's trail across the country. What Geyer discovered horrified even seasoned investigators. In Toronto, he found the remains of 2 Pitezel daughters, their bodies decomposed in a rented house basement. Holmes was arrested in November 1894. As police investigated his Chicago castle, the true scope of his crimes became clear. They found evidence of torture, murder equipment, and human remains. Conservative estimates put his victim count at 27, but many believe the true number was well over 200. During his trial, Holmes showed no remorse, even seeming to take pride in his elaborate schemes. He confessed to 27 murders, then later recanted, claiming innocence. The jury wasn't fooled. On May 7, 1896, Dr. H. Holmes was hanged for his crimes. The murder castle didn't survive long after Holmes's execution. In 1895, it mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Many believed it was deliberately destroyed to erase the memory of the horrors that had taken place within its walls. Holmes's story became the inspiration for countless books and films, but perhaps none captured the chilling reality better than Erik Larson's The Devil in the White City, which juxtaposed Holmes's reign of terror with the grandeur of the Chicago World's Fair. What makes Holmes particularly terrifying wasn't just his brutality, but his ability to hide in plain sight. He was America's introduction to the modern serial killer, organized, methodical, and utterly without conscience. In an age of progress and optimism, Holmes proved that the most dangerous monsters could wear the most charming masks. The legacy of H. Holmes reminds us that evil often comes dressed as respectability, and that behind the most welcoming doors can lurk the darkest intentions.